All right, here we go. Deeper dive. Get everything set up here. Dave Lochran and my man Adam Shaw breaking down a 8-game NBA slate Friday. Adam, heading into the weekend, baby. I got 6 inches of snow yesterday. What type of nonsense is that?
Yeah, man, that's it's too early for that.
And then, meteorologists, people want to say they don't like DFS touts. Yeah. What do you know about meteorologists, man? They're like, yeah, don't worry. By around 6 o'clock, it'll turn the rain and everything will melt. Well, if I were to pan my camera out the window, those 6 inches are still there. And most people decide, like, I'm not going to shovel. I'll just let it rock. Well, yeah, they got ice now.
Yeah, I'll say that's not fun because now it's ice and it's heavy and it sucks to shovel.
Yeah, it certainly does. Glad to have everybody with us. We got California Cool in the house. He's always here. He's a good fella. Eric McPherson. Who's that guy? Bathrobe basement music time. Big time Bobby Beats. All right, let's go. Skylar Salenko. Kyle, last name I'm not going to try and pronounce. Adam, 8-game slate. Very interesting games. A couple blowout risks with two of the highest priced options on the slate and a few injuries that we're still waiting on here.
Yeah, pretty interesting slate. A couple of games that I really just couldn't care less about from a DFS standpoint, and then some other ones that I think are really, really interesting.
All right. All right. Manningdale City. And then I'm done with the chat. Says, I like watching you guys so much it feels weird. I think that's a compliment. I do. I think that's a compliment. Thanks, bro. All right, man. Let's jump into it. 8 games to talk about here. By the way, hit us with a thumbs up. Much appreciated. We love you. Love us back. All right, Miami, Indiana. This one, you and I have kind of been talking about this one off and on throughout the whole day. Pacers 5.5-point favorites here. You got a 214 total. Oladipo recently has just been on another planet, right? Now, here's a guy who early in the year was kind of okay, but not great. You're talking about his last 6 games, 33% usage, 30% assist rate, 1.4 fantasy points per minute, 50 plus DK points in 3 straight, 5 of his last 6. So I start looking into this, and you can find all of this on awesomeo.com in the deep dive. Adam and I rotate each day's like full out position by position, complete breakdown. And if you want a free trial, use the code Deeper Dive, all one word, on the Join Now page. Deeper Dive, you get a free week of all premium content. That's Deeper Dive, one word. Anyway, I start looking in like, why is this happening, right? He could just be on a hot streak, right? And I'm sure it has something to do with it, Adam. But then I start looking a little bit further. And Nate McMillan has given him some additional run with Joseph and Collison, who you're about to talk about. And he's played 31 minutes with those guys over the last 2 games, and they're closing them out. Now, there's some concerns with that, like maybe that won't continue. But with them on the court this season, 58 minutes, with Oladipo, Collison, and Joseph, that grouping, Oladipo's got a 38% usage rate and 1.87 fantasy points per minute. It's insane. But at the same time, it's like, all right, Joseph and Collison are not shooters. They don't like to shoot. It makes sense that he's going to take over even more than he would with the regular lineup out there. So I think that has something to do with it, Adam. But then you're also, if that's the case, Collison would figure to play more minutes too, or would he?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I don't want to draw too many conclusions from the 2 closing lineups in their 2 most recent games, because in one of those games, Thad Young was ejected in the second quarter, so that obviously is going to change
Yep.
what happens in the second half. And then last game, we saw Collison close alongside Joseph, which was good to see. And for the season, I've been saying that I think more times than not, you can project around 32 to 34 minutes from Collison. It's just that they haven't really been consistent with their closing lineups. So I don't want to think that just because it happened a couple games in a row that that's like the norm now, but I still think that you can project Collison for 32 to 34 minutes. And at his price tag, it factors in all of the risk that you would get with his minutes being volatile this season. So I do think Collison's a good play at, 4,500 on DraftKings and 5K on FanDuel. I think he's just too cheap. As far as Oladipo, the more minutes he plays with that group that you were talking about, obviously it does increase his ceiling a little bit. But for me, it's still just that he's so expensive on this slate where there are some, underpriced guys at his positions that I still am not getting there.
I'm having trouble getting there too. Funny too, because I like him on this. Like I like him. I think Oladipo can put up big numbers again. But you are paying a lot for him. I'm gonna sprinkle him in, but I probably only have, like, let's say on 150 lineups, probably like 5% Oladipo, and that might be because I force him into a few. I really don't have all that much, but I'm with you on Collison. Even if you don't see him close out these games with Joseph, and mind, like that is obviously contributing a lot to the fact that he's getting the additional minutes recently, Adam, because now you got like one of your backup guards that is playing alongside of you. The same thing we saw with like Beverly and Gilgeous-Alexander, where his minutes were more secure. Uh, but yeah, you're seeing heavy minutes from him. If McMillan is in fact liking this lineup that has done well for him recently, there's a very good chance Collison does see those big minutes, but we'll need him to close out the game, which will also mean it needs to stay close.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that basically it just comes down to the price for me, and the price on Collison takes away a lot of the risk.
What about the rest of this Indiana team? We've talked Collison. We both agree, very solid value. He is too cheap despite the low per minute production. We talked Oladipo, a little bit too expensive, but in a pretty decent spot given the usage. And then there's the rest of this Indiana squad.
Yeah, I have nothing else that I'm even coming close to prioritizing. Thad Young at 4,400, if you're playing a bunch of tournament lineups, I think there's pretty clearly a path to him getting there. Like if he closes instead of either Joseph or Collison and he gets back to playing, 32 to 33 or 34 minutes, like then it becomes a cheap price tag for him as well. But yeah, outside of that, there's nothing here that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, me neither. I can't say I'm that interested on the other side either. Like I think Josh Richardson is fine if you want to sprinkle him in. Tyler Johnson should still get decent run coming off a season high 24 points. Dwayne Wade remains out, but there's no one I'm prioritizing for the Heat today. What about you?
No, me neither. Whiteside and Richardson are the two guys that I would have any interest in, but neither one's anywhere close to a priority for me.
All right, let's keep it going then. That's the first game in the books. Manningdale City says rumor Collison for Ariza trade, and Ariza's been out for personal reasons. And it's not crazy. They don't have really any guard depth in Phoenix, and I guess they could use Ariza in Indiana. I don't know. Who? I mean,
I don't know what Ariza would do in Indiana.
I have no idea. It's like the same thing where apparently Houston was trying to trade Melo, so they tried to make it seem like nothing was his fault, which I think is actually pretty honorable, to be honest with you. But with Ariza, the guy doesn't really offer much. I get that he's playing 100 minutes a night, but that just seems a little strange to me. Who knows?
I mean,
Maybe it's true.
I think Ariza's decent. I just think it would be a weird fit on Indiana.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
don't
think
think. Yeah, I don't. I'm not as much on the Ariza decent thing, but it doesn't even matter at this point. Look, if Collison's slated to play, this is the first game. This is tip. Like I'm just entertaining this notion for a second. It's not like baseball. You rarely see baseball where they're pulled out mid game. Although I was in the DraftKings box for do you remember the Sixers Cavs game where Dion Waiters was traded right before the game tipped off a few years back?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, I was in the box for that, and I brought my fiance, so I didn't play. I played like a couple $100. I wasn't like super worried about my lineups, and everyone in the box, obviously invited by DK, playing. I'm assuming a decent amount. All of them or most of them had waiters. It was chalk waiters night, and no one wanted to watch the game after that. Everyone was miserable. You just walked off the court. But so it happens, but it's not something I'd be super worried about at all. Actually, like not at all. Brooklyn and Washington, Adam. Let's keep it moving here. Wizards 6.5-point favorites. Finally coming off a convincing win, huh? Your Wizards finally getting a convincing win against the Cavs, who are playing their second of a back-to-back on the road.
Yeah, I still hate Scott Brooks. So.
Okay. 6.5 points, 224 total. Yeah, you would think it's a pace-up game for the Wizards, but it actually isn't. I mean, this is a Brooklyn team that's playing at a pretty slow pace this year. I got to say, I really like the matchup for Wall. I love the fact that He played only 21 minutes in a blowout last game. Brooks had talked, as you mentioned, about getting him some rest. So, I mean, this is one where if it's competitive, I don't think you see Wall see any abbreviated minutes whatsoever now that he's now that he's back and rested. But again, do you pay for John Wall now that he's 95 on DraftKings and he's crossed the 10K threshold on FanDuel?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that I can get there because even if he is going to, in a competitive game, let's say he does go back and play like 36, 37 minutes, the price tags come up as well. I was really interested when he was playing 40 minutes a night at, 8,200 or whatever he was at. Now with the price tag coming back up and plenty of other options on this slate, I just don't really see getting to him. I don't really see getting to Beal either. He's finally come up on DraftKings to 8,100. Yep. He's been expensive on FanDuel basically all season long. If I'm going to the Wizards here, I'm much more interested in the front court than the back court.
You know what? You're right. And it felt horrible writing up Dwight again because each time I've written him up over the past week, it's like blowout last game. And then what was the other? No minutes because the bench came back. Foul trouble in one game. Like it's just Dwight, no matter what, has made things difficult. But his price keeps coming down, and he's facing a Nets team that's hemorrhaging production to opposing centers this year.
Yeah, I think his price just factors in any risk that you're going to point out with Dwight Howard. Is Washington going to be, we talked about this in preseason, we talked about it at the beginning of the season. I think Washington's going to be very unpredictable on a game-to-game basis as far as their front court rotation because they do just have so many kind of interchangeable parts with, Rivers who can slide down to the three. You have Kelly Oubre who's actually good. You have Jeff Green, Morris, Porter. Like there's so many different ways this team can go that I think they'll be tough to predict on a game by game basis. But when you're talking about guys that are priced as cheaply as the Wizards front court is, especially on DraftKings, then it's factoring in the risk there. Dwight Howard certainly can play 33 or 34 minutes in this game. And if he does, it's very, very likely that he just destroys his price tag. So, at the very least, I want him in tournaments. Cash games, I think that you can go other ways on this slate. But in tournaments, especially because he hasn't been popular either. Last slate, he was like 4% owned against Cleveland at the same price tag. So I still want to get to Howard quite a bit in tournaments.
So do I. Jonathan Clark says, no Howard, not enough minutes. I'm cool with you not wanting to play Howard because he's Howard, and it's just like not a place you want to go at a deep position. But the truth, Adam, is that minutes really shouldn't be an issue. Like, had it not been for the blowouts, and it sounds like we're making excuses here, but it's just the way the game reads. If it wasn't for the blowouts, if it wasn't for Scott Brooks literally not playing 3 of the 5 starters down the stretch because the bench brought him back, and I think foul trouble in one game of this year, he would be playing, as we're seeing, like 30 plus minutes a night.
Right. And the point about, Howard not playing enough minutes is exactly why you play him in tournaments, because that's what his game logs say, is that he's not playing a lot of minutes. But if you actually look at the games, there's been blowouts, there's been foul trouble, there's been games where the unit with, Jeff Green and Oubre gets hot. And so Howard just doesn't come back in. If Howard were going to be, 40 or 50% owned, and you have all those risks of, Washington playing small or whatever, then that's when you don't play him. But when you have everyone scared off because it's happened 3 games in a row where there's some reason that he doesn't play, that's when you get really cheap Howard at low ownership and the potential to just win a tournament with what really is one of the easier plays on the slate.
Yep, good point. And look, if you don't want to play Dwight, just because he's burned you so much and you don't think it's worth the risk, definitely don't play him. But it's not, the minutes wouldn't be the concern for me, is what I'm saying. And I'm curious to know where you stand on Markieff Morris, because similarly, he has lost minutes from foul trouble, from blowouts, from the bench coming back. And we've seen that happen multiple times in different forms over the past 8-9 days.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's too cheap also. I have him projected for about 32 minutes here. I think it could be a little bit higher even, if this game does stay competitive. But I am just trying to, keep it under control a little bit because, again, I think that there's a lot of moving parts here. For one, sometimes we see Markieff Morris basically staggered with Dwight Howard, where Morris gets the time at the 5 when Howard's not in, and Jan Mahinmi doesn't really play. Last game, we saw Mahinmi play in the first half and the second half. 2 games ago, Mahinmi played in the first half, Morris played in the second half. So I don't really know what they're going to do. I hate the fact that Scott Brooks insists on still playing Jan Mahinmi. Like, he comes out and says that he wants to play small every season, and then he just runs nothing but like traditional centers. So that scares me, but there is plenty of upside for Morris if he does start getting more minutes at the 5. I do think that he's underpriced regardless. Like, if this game's competitive for 4 quarters, I don't really see how he doesn't play at least 30 or 32 minutes as long as he's not in foul trouble.
Yeah, and it's really like for Morris, Morris is the epitome of a price play. He's dirt cheap. On FanDuel, he's what is he, 46 or 48? Really, really cheap on FanDuel. He's a price play, and he's the type of guy that, say you get 35 minutes. Let's not ignore the 39 minutes he played in regulation just 4 days ago, Adam. So it's not like a guy at 4,500 that plays in the front court is very capable of being in a winning tournament lineup. I go nowhere near Morris in cash. That's just no. I'm not touching him in cash, but to me, Morris still gives you a high enough ceiling at such a cheap price point, given that we've seen him play big minutes just over the past couple of days.
Yeah, he's basically the same thing we just said about Dwight Howard. He's the guy
Yeah,
that you play when he's cheap and people aren't going to play him, and then you just go somewhere else when everyone plays him.
for sure. The other side of this game, Brooklyn, we're still waiting on the news from. At this point, I gotta tell you, man, you gotta wonder. You gotta wonder what was plaguing Jared Allen. I know he's playing, but that's one hell of a lingering illness to have. You're questionable 5 days into getting it. Maybe he had the flu. Who knows? But he's in, and then Rondae Hollis Jefferson is out. So that's kind of interesting, right? Well, if both of them were out, I'd have probably had Ed Davis in every damn lineup. But now Rondae Hollis Jefferson's out, Jared Allen's in. So pretty much the reverse of what we've seen the past 2 games.
Yeah, and I think it opens up some value from this Brooklyn team, particularly on the wings. If you had Hollis Jefferson in and Allen in, it was going to just kind of flatten everything out and make it tough to really go to any of these guys. But if you're taking 18 to 22 minutes from the 4 from Hollis Jefferson, then I think that you can bump Dudley up a little bit. To like 26 minutes, but you also see Alan Crabb probably get up to about 30 minutes. You see DeMarre Carroll probably play around 26 minutes. And this is not a good Washington defense. It is a relatively fast Washington team as well. So I think that at the price tags these guys come in at, they become pretty interesting value plays. I mean, Jared Dudley at 3,300, like, it's still Jared Dudley. It would have to be, I mean, if I'm max entering, then sure. But Carroll and Crabb, I think, are both interesting. Crabb at 37 on DraftKings, Carroll at 4K. I think if you get around 30 and 26 minutes apiece, that they both project to be right around 6 times their salary.
You broke up a little bit. What are your thoughts? I know you have some interest in Alan Crabb. How much interest in Alan Crabb? Because this is when we get into some murky waters. When Alan Crabb hits the radar.
Yeah,
that was not supposed to be a pun. Okay, the whole waters and I promise you that would have been terrible. I'm waiting for that comment in chat. It's a commonly used phrase. Go ahead.
I haven't recrunched my lineup since that news came out because I'm afraid if I try and use Fantasy Cruncher right now, it'll kick me off air. But
Okay.
but I do
that modem never came in.
I figured out it's my computer, not the internet, so I never even got it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm afraid it'll crash my computer if I try and use Cruncher. So I do like Crabb, though. I mean, I think that it's a good spot. I think that he plays around 30 minutes. He's only 3,700 on DraftKings. He's cheap on FanDuel as well. So especially if you're going to see more people go to Pat Connaughton, I think that you can either play Crabb in place of him or you can just play them along.
Oh, there you are. You're back. I was waiting for Josh to jump in. I was waiting on it. I think
No,
Josh, unless it's me, I don't think so, though.
Yeah, he broke up on that one. I got nervous.
I know. I heard your mic come on. I heard you unmute yourself. Yeah, there's a sure sign of Josh lingering. But anyway, I'll have a little bit of Crabb. Singular. I don't plan on really getting in deep there, only because even with Hollis Jefferson out, and I don't want to stay on this too long, Adam, but like even with him out, they do still have a lot of bodies. I projected Carroll for around 25 minutes the other game. He plays 28. And granted, I know Allen was out, but still, Joe Harris, Damari Carroll, Allen Crabbe, Jared Dudley. You have Dinwiddie playing multiple positions, or I'm sorry, Napier. If he even plays, there are a lot of bodies here. Is all I'm saying. That's my concern.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, no, I agree. I still think he plays around 30.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, he's playing like 26, 24, 28, so he won't need a huge boost to get up to 30. So I definitely see it. It's just tough with like Brooklyn Nets roulette. You never know which one of them is going to play the minutes, and you never know which one of them is going to produce. Like D'Angelo Russell's a pretty good example of that too. But Crabbe's cheap enough to where it doesn't really matter. Want to move on?
I do really like D'Angelo Russell as well, though. 29% usage rate, 37% assist percentage since last season without Karis LeVert on the floor. His minutes were down last game because of foul trouble, so I think this is a nice spot for him.
All right, sounds good. What are your thoughts on Ed Davis?
I'm good. He's priced up enough where I'm just not going there.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Man, his per minute production in those 2 games without Allen was like ridiculously good, though. And that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, but, exactly. But like he should. This is the spot where he should smash. I mean, he's going to be in there against Washington's second unit that can't rebound and can't really do anything.
Yeah.
But just without Allen like getting sick again or getting hurt, I just don't have confidence that Davis gets enough minutes.
For sure. Toronto and Boston. I tell you what, I don't know. By the way, Boston 2-point favorites at home. This should be a fun game to watch. Not one that I'm particularly interested in from a fantasy standpoint. 218 total here. Yeah, it's cool that Gordon Hayward's no longer on a minutes restriction. That's good going forward. But first, he needs to do something in terms of production. Look, he hasn't been terrible his past couple games, but he had a couple friendly matchups. And this one is not nearly as friendly. It's tough for Irving. It's tough for the Toronto side. I don't know if I'm going to land here, Adam. What about you?
I have nothing here. I mean, if you wanted to make an argument for Kawhi or for Kyrie on the other side, then sure, especially Kyrie at 7,700. But there's just no way I can prioritize that when you compare them to other people. Like Kyrie's 7,700 on DraftKings, Mike Conley's 7K, D'Angelo Russell 6,600 against the Wizards. I just can't justify getting up to Kyrie there. And Hayward's just not been good this season. I mean, even that last game against Chicago, he finished with 28 points, which seems nice, 28 fantasy points, but he played awful.
Terrible. He's not been very good. He has not been very good. Look, you can at 5,400, knowing that if this game's close, he'll probably play 31 minutes. I don't hate it, but I also have a lot of guys in this exact same price range or lower that I think can outproduce him on a per minute basis and a fantasy point per dollar basis.
Yeah, exactly. There's just nothing here that stands out to me as a great play in terms of, anything.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on then. If you have any questions on this game we didn't touch on it, throw it in the chat on Slack if you're a member, and in YouTube if you are not yet a member or you like to watch on YouTube. By the way, don't forget, give us a thumbs up, show us some love, hit that button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know when all the shows are going to start. And if you're not a member, use the code DEEPERDIVE, all one word, on awesomemode.com on the Join Now page to get a week free of premium content. Everything behind the paywall is all yours for an entire week for free. All right. Utah, Philadelphia. Let's have some fun and break down this rotation from Wednesday with Jimmy Butler in it. Philly is a 3-point favorite, 217 total. So interestingly enough, Adam, they blew a 16-point lead in the fourth quarter. Not a surprise. They do this a lot. And Brett Brown continues to drive me insane. That said, Jimmy Butler took only 4 shots in the fourth quarter. They didn't bring Butler on to take 4 shots in the fourth quarter. I promise you that. This is the dude that they want to close games for him. And I think, I get the mentality, I get his personality and everything, but it still seemed like a spot watching that game where he wasn't trying to take over and be that dominant dude, the first game he played. I think you're going to see a difference today. And Brett Brown, is to some extent on the hot seat. He's put it not on the hot. He's been taking a lot of heat for some of these losses recently. And then you have also here, Adam, I'm throwing a lot at you, so try and absorb all of this. Then you had Ben Simmons, who saw only 2 less touches than his season average, 2 fewer potential assists than his season average, but took 5 shots and seemed entirely uninterested all game. I will take back what I said about Simmons potentially benefiting from this last week. I'll take an L, and I'll be proud of taking the L, because I thought he at least had some interest in playing. He didn't even seem to care. So it's a problem. Oh, and also Embiid and Butler ran some really solid pick and rolls. Butler's a legit threat in the pick and roll because he can shoot. And you know who can't shoot? Ben Simmons, which is why they ran the fewest pick and roll possessions in the league before Butler. Floor is yours. Break this one down. I know you have some interesting tidbits on last game's rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still obviously a lot of moving parts here. I would expect that Brett Brown is experimenting with how to, best make this work. But looking at the rotations that they ran against Orlando, you got basically 14 minutes of Joel Embiid playing without either one of Simmons or Butler on the floor. This season, without Simmons on the floor or without Butler, but obviously mostly without Simmons, he's averaged 1.6 DraftKings points per minute. Been incredibly productive. And if you look at Utah's normal rotations, you would end up with Embiid defended by Favors without Simmons or Butler on the floor if Philly's rotation stays the same and if Quinn Snyder doesn't adjust. That's not to say that Quinn Snyder won't adjust, but it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen an NBA coach, not make an obvious adjustment and just keep doing, the status quo. So point being that I think this is it's a nice spot for Embiid anyway. I'm not concerned about the matchup for him regardless, but if the rotations stay the same that they have been for these two teams, it actually is a really good spot for Embiid. The only thing not to like is on DraftKings, the position is incredibly deep. And again, we have underpriced guys. On FanDuel, I think it will be a little bit easier to get to Embiid. So I think that's interesting. For Ben Simmons, the price tag on DraftKings is appealing at $8,200, but on this slate, I just don't see getting there. I think there are enough other places I can go. On FanDuel, as a $9,100 point guard, I really don't have interest. Jimmy Butler is underpriced on DraftKings as well at $7,300. But again, I think that there are just enough options on this slate where unless I'm max entering tournaments, I am fine just kind of letting this play out and seeing how Philadelphia plays in their second game, especially in a relatively difficult matchup with the Jazz.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Butler at 73 on DraftKings still has my attention, though. That last game, he really just didn't. He wasn't aggressive at all. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Brown give him more than 33 minutes. This isn't a Tom Thibodeau type deal. Don't get me wrong. Covington played 41 minutes in his first game. He's like, what did I get myself into? But I think this could be a game where Butler comes out and puts up some solid numbers. This is a Utah team, by the way, that just got beat by 50 points by the Dallas Mavericks. I don't really have much from Philly, though, Adam. It's a spot where, I always have some interest in Embiid because no matter what the matchup is, the dude has monster upside. But I'm probably drawing it there, and then maybe like 5 or 10%, maybe probably like around 5%, maybe 10 to Jimmy Butler just to sprinkle him in. What's your exposure looking like to these Philly guys?
I'm just playing single entry and 3 max today, so I doubt that I end up with any Philly, except for maybe Embiid on FanDuel.
All right, fair enough. On the other side, I got some interesting numbers for you. As good as Embiid is, and he is a solid defender, the Sixers are allowing more points than any other team to centers, more field goal attempts than any other team. I get it. Rudy Gobert, not a high usage guy, but second most rebounds, second most blocks. Gobert ranks 6th and 5th in those categories. And even though he doesn't take a ton of shots, 82% of his shots are coming from around the basket. He's going to get some offensive rebounds, some opportunities. He converts on almost all of those shots around the rim. And he's just such a good rebounder and shot blocker. And they're going to want him out there for as many minutes as possible, unless he, like the rest of them, goes down in a line with foul trouble, as Embiid's done to so many in the past. I actually have quite a bit of interest in Gobert, especially given that I think Marc Gasol around the same price is going to be higher owned. Any interest in Utah for you?
Gobert is the only guy that I have interest in. I still have trouble getting there because I like Gasol a little bit more. I like Nurkic more. You have Dwight Howard. You have other guys that we'll talk about at the position. So I like Gobert, but I still don't think I'll end up with much.
All right. That's it from this team?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, our ownership, by the way, on DraftKings has Marc Gasol as one of the highest owned players on this slate, and Gobert basically being not owned at all. Dwight Howard being one of the highest owned. We'll see once this changes. I think we should get an update relatively soon. But yeah, Gasol and Howard are two guys that are probably going to be pretty popular. So I don't mind going to Gobert here. Just in terms of rebound chances, he's doubling Gasol this year. In terms of blocked shots on attempts at the rim, both around the same attempts, Gobert's doubling him, actually more than almost tripling him in block shots per game. So, and they're actually averaging the same amount of points. So I will go to Gobert here and have quite a bit of him because he's been pretty consistent as well. But outside of that, yeah, I'm good. I don't, even Donnie Mitchell, who's pretty cheap, I don't see myself ending up there, Adam.
Yeah, no, neither do I. And I do agree with your point on the ownership with Gobert and Gasol. Like, I have Gasol projected slightly ahead of Gobert, but if the ownership projections stay the way they are now, I would prefer Gobert in tournaments.
All right, sounds good to me. Let's talk about the Timberwolves and the Portland Trail Blazers. 1 point spread here. 1 point spread. Timberwolves are slight dogs at home. 222.5 total. You look at pace. It's nothing huge here. We have a couple games where the pace differentials are massive. I think you know which ones I'm talking about too. This one is there's a slight pace boost. Timberwolves playing at a quicker pace than the Blazers, so the Blazers get a boost here, but nothing insane. Let's start with the Blazers side of the ball and go to our boy Yusuf Nurkic, who is producing 1.4 on the season, Adam. 1.4 fantasy points per minute. That's incredible.
Yeah, he's been great. And as always, the only issue with him is how much Terry Stotts will play him. But we've seen Zach Collins playing the four more frequently, getting some minutes alongside Nurkic, which you and I were talking before the show earlier today. I think that's really important because Zach Collins, they like him in Portland. He's been productive when he plays. It's hard to go into a game thinking that Zach Collins isn't going to get at least 16 to 18 minutes of run. But now that they're playing him alongside Nurkic, we know they don't really care that much about getting, Myers Leonard minutes or getting Caleb Swanigan minutes. So it makes it so you can have some, outlier games like we did against the Lakers where Nurkic plays 35. Obviously outside of maybe for tournament purposes, you're not going to project him for that many minutes, but it makes it a lot easier for Nurkic to get into the 32 or 30 to 32 minute range, which gives him, just monster upside because of how productive he is when he's on the floor. And then here you have a big Minnesota court where you would expect Nurkic to play as much as he can. So I really like him even at an elevated price tag in tournaments here. I think that the upside is still phenomenal.
Yep, so do I. Not only that, but he's still not that expensive. I mean, he's getting up there, sure. There's no question his price is inflating, but it's nothing insane. The reason I say this is he played 35 minutes last game. Terry Stotts, I never have. I think you have a little bit more faith in Stotts than I do to continue giving him, consistent high 20s in minutes. But did anything stand out last game where to give you the 35 minutes?
Not that I noticed, other than that Collins was playing alongside him.
Yeah, I couldn't figure anything out either. I don't think it's crazy to think he could get 30 minutes, but I'm going to project him around 28.
Yeah, I mean, for tournaments, I've projected at 34, but
oh wow,
but like trying to get a median, I would project him at like 30.
Okay, yeah, because that was the first game he played over 30 minutes all year.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of like foul trouble, weird rotation type stuff. I basically project him for 30 minutes like every day, but for this spot, I'm projecting a little bit higher.
All right, fair enough. Well, you have Nurkic, and then you have guys like Al-Farouq Aminu, who's pretty cheap, and I'm sure makes sense as a filler in some spots. You have CJ McCollum, who has one good game this season, and then a few decent games, and then a few horrible games. And then you have Dame coming off that really solid game against the Lakers. I think we all saw that coming. It was a monster performance. Only shot 8 for 23, but shot 12 of 13 from the line, had 8 boards, 11 dimes. Big game from Dame. He and Bron kind of dueled it out in that whole all 4 quarters. What do you make of the backcourt and everybody else not named Jusuf Nurkic for Portland?
I think this is one of the more interesting spots on the slate in terms of we don't really know how things are going to go. With Seth Curry out, there's a chance that Terry Stotts goes back to staggering Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, which makes both of them more productive because they'll play more minutes without the other one on the floor. That's what happened in the second half of the last game once Curry was injured. We saw their minutes be staggered, but they also have Wade Baldwin that they could use as the backup point guard here. So I haven't seen anything suggesting which way that will go. All that I really have to go on is that we saw in the second half of last game that they staggered. So for right now, I did kind of hedge a little bit, and I have Baldwin playing a few minutes, but I also bumped the projection for Lillard and for McCollum. Also, I think that you see, because of Curry being out, you see Evan Turner's minutes even more solidified here in the upper 20 to low 30s range, but also the potential for more ball handling responsibilities, because if they don't stagger McCollum and Lillard's minutes, and you do continue to get a true second unit out there from Portland, it's just basically Evan Turner playing point guard. So I think that Evan Turner makes for a pretty nice value play that goes probably a little bit overlooked here, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I considered him, and I just have trouble getting there because he's Evan Turner.
Well, for me, it's not even that. It's that, at least on FanDuel, I like him a lot. On DraftKings, yeah, he's cheap at 4,400, but when you compare him to some other guys like Pat Connaughton, for example, who I expect to be really popular, to me, they're not even the same. It's not even like it's a pivot because he's, 35% more expensive or something. So that's the issue on DraftKings for me. On FanDuel, I do like Evan Turner quite a bit.
Yeah, that actually makes sense because with Evan Turner, he's 45, Pat Connaughton, who we're going to talk about, is 43. And if you were to say, give me a percentage of how many times Evan Turner finishes with better fantasy totals than Connaughton, I'd probably say well over 50%, Adam. So yeah, assuming that he is the natural pivot there that most people won't even consider, I definitely think that makes sense from tournaments, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I have Evan Turner projected for more points than Pat Connaughton. It's just that on DraftKings, Connaughton's way cheaper. On FanDuel, he's not.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm speaking just FanDuel specific here. Yeah. I don't think on DraftKings it's necessary. On the other side, you got Minnesota. Karl Anthony Towns finally looking like the number 1 overall pick that he was expected to play as. He's looked so much better lately. Maybe he knew that Butler was going. And then since Butler's been gone in that one game, he was pretty solid. Robert Covington played 41 minutes. New teammate, an old teammate, Dario Saric, came off the bench. He was the first man off the bench, but played only 20 minutes. And then you had Wiggins, who played 38 minutes with a really solid game. Mind you, this is the first game with no Butler at all. Or is it the second game with no Butler? It's the first game with Covington and Saric, I should say.
Yeah, first game with Covington and Saric.
Yeah, first game with Covington and Saric. That's what I meant, because this is really all that matters at this point. And then aside from that, Jeff Teague has looked really good since returning. If you take a look at this guy's numbers, he's averaging 17.5 potential assists in 2 games. Averaging, not total, averaging. 24% usage, 1.2 fantasy points per minute. Granted, it's a small sample, it's 2 games, but we've seen him look really good. And Thibodeau, no surprise, threw him right back into the fire, 35 plus minutes in both games. So it's definitely one of those spots where if Rose is out, I still think this is a decent spot. Teague's played 60 minutes without Rose and Butler this year. He has a 26% usage rate, 55% assist rate, and 1.36 fantasy points per minute.
Yeah, I think that, so assuming Rose is back, because it sounds like he should be, I do think you lose a few minutes for Teague here. Josh and I were talking about it this morning. I expect Tyus Jones to still play around 12 minutes. I expect Rose to get a little bit of run at point, and then Rose to back up Andrew Wiggins. So I have Teague and Rose both projected for 30 minutes. And with Teague's price rising, I still think that he's an okay play. He's someone that I would have if I'm making 150 tournament lineups. But it's I just don't have him projected high enough to get into my single entry or 3-max stuff very easily. Towns I still love. Wiggins I like, but I don't see getting to Teague here outside
So
of max entry stuff.
what if Rose doesn't play?
Then I would have Teague back at like 36 minutes, which would still make him a really good play.
So the reason I say that is because I have zero faith whatsoever in Thibodeau to give us viable information. So I really have no idea. Right? Like we've seen Wiggins probable, questionable, doubtful, in and then out. That's a bit hyperbolic, but you get my point, right? Like we've seen so much craziness that I still want to lay out the scenario in the event that Rose doesn't play, because it's not crazy to think that he might not, just because of so much nonsense that we've seen from this Minnesota team early in the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. Like, he could not play, but I'm projecting him in for now.
I think Covington too on DraftKings. I really don't have a problem with Covington. The problem is what do his minutes look now? If Rose is out, I think Covington probably plays another 40 minutes. But if he doesn't, or if Rose does play, how do you see this rotation breaking down? Because with Gibson and Saric, they're just going to split the minutes at the 4. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah.
That's what they did last time, right? And then Towns and Gorgie Jang, he'll back him up. He'll get his 10, 13 minutes per game. But then we've seen Rose start alongside Teague, but that's before Covington was active. I would expect Covington to start again and Rose to come off the bench. So what do you make of the minutes there if Rose plays?
Yeah, I'm expecting
for Covington.
I'm expecting Covington to start. I have him for 36 minutes, assuming Rose is in. I expect that Wiggins basically will be staggered with Covington. Wiggins will play backup 3, and then Rose will be Wiggins backup. So basically, Wiggins ends up getting like 24 minutes at the 2, 12 minutes at the 3. Rose gets around 24 at the 2 and like 6 at point.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I'd take a few from Covington, probably not 40, but still good run there. I think Thibodeau's going to just use him and abuse him for everything that he can. He's 5,300 on DraftKings. It's not a crazy price for a guy that's going to get a ton of run. He's a 3-and-D guy, but you get those games with the steals and he's hitting threes, and it's very doable. Outside of that, we'll move on unless there's anyone else you want to talk about in this one.
No, I think that's it.
All right, Memphis and Sacramento. This is where it gets fun, Adam. The Grizzlies gain a 10-possession pace differential. So 10 possessions per game almost is how many more the Kings are playing per 48 minutes than Memphis. That's a huge, huge disparity or a differential. It's massive. I think you would agree. And you look at this Memphis squad, we'll start with them. Jaren Jackson, I'm going back to the well. Blow me up in chat. I don't care. Foul trouble's a big foul trouble. I mean, I not preface it every time with if he stays out of foul trouble. Last game he didn't. He still had 21.5 fantasy points in 16 minutes. Not that we wanted that, but his per minute production is evident. Mike Conley 7,000. Shelvin Mack is getting run with Dillon Brooks out. Kyle Anderson, since Dillon Brooks is out, played 38 plus minutes in both games, and Marc Gasol's 7,400. This might be the first time all season I have interest in like a lot of Memphis Grizzlies players. I can't say it feels good, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the entire team is underpriced, at least on DraftKings, I think. Aubrey Casspi is probable. I think that at least throws a little bit of a wrench into that wing rotation. If you give him, 12 to 14 minutes at the 4, you can kind of slide everyone back and eat some of the minutes that Temple and Anderson were playing. But that being said, I still think that Anderson plays 32 to 34 minutes here. I still think Temple plays around 34 minutes. Marshawn Brooks comes in at like 16, Selden around 16. So Anderson still ends up being a really good play for me. He's obviously not the highest usage guy. He doesn't score a ton of points, but he's been rebounding a lot. His rebound percentage this season is barely behind Marcus Gasol. It's a pace-up spot where the ability of Anderson to do everything, from assists to rebounding to scoring a little bit, I think it's a spot that just really, really plays in his favor. So I like Kyle Anderson. I like Jaren Jackson. I'm right there with you. If he stays out of foul trouble, there's no reason that he should not be productive in this spot. And then, Gasol and Conley, obviously really good spots for them. I'm not getting quite as much of them as I am of the cheaper guys here, just because there's, other expensive guys that I like, and I don't want a million Memphis guys in the same lineup. But I do think that there's just a lot of different ways to go on this team.
There are. There are a lot, and that's a little bit concerning. But still, when you're getting guys at these price points, I think my highest score ever on DraftKings was tied with like 10 other people because it was the day where Memphis had, I think, 7 bodies. You were playing then, right? Yeah, you had them. It was like 3 years ago. Memphis was playing 7 bodies, and it was like Tony Allen, Marc Gasol was out. Like everybody was out. Mario Chalmers, I think, was a starting point guard. And basically you were projecting and getting 40 minutes from like 5 different players. It was insane. So Memphis has done us well in the past. It's just they do have a lot fewer injuries now and some better players. But let's do this before we move on to Sacramento. Let's rank our players from Memphis in order of preference. I'll give you Jaren Jackson tournaments. I'm going to talk tournaments here. Jaren Jackson followed by Conley, then Anderson, then Gasol, then Mac. What about you?
Jackson, Anderson, Conley, Gasol, Temple.
Okay, so we're actually pretty close. We're closer than I expected there. Talk to me about Sacramento. It's a huge pace-up game for Memphis, but certainly a spot where Sacramento will lose a little bit here in a tough matchup.
Yeah, I don't have much on prioritizing here unless you're intentionally just trying to balance your lineups. Like if you decide to go with 3 different Memphis guys and want to run it back with Sacramento, then guys like De'Aaron Fox and Willie Cauley-Stein are certainly underpriced for their ceiling, but I think that relative to other guys on the slate, they're pretty appropriately priced, and so it's making it so I'm not prioritizing them outside of anywhere where I end up kind of trying to game stack here. Bogdanovich at 4,200, I think plays around 26 minutes here. I think the price tag in a vacuum is too cheap, but I also think that there's enough value on the slate that I don't really need to go to him. There's just not a whole lot from Sacramento here.
All right. Me neither. I don't hate De'Aaron Fox, but I definitely don't love him here. He functions a lot in the pick and roll. Mike Conley's very good at pick and roll defense. Fox actually had a solid game against the Grizzlies and Conley earlier this season, but it's still, it's still not a favorable matchup for Fox, even though he's looked pretty solid this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a pace down spot. It's still a good Memphis defense. That doesn't affect his ceiling. It just affects the probability of him getting there. So, if he'd be one of the first guys where if I'm playing like 3 Memphis players and I want to run it back, he'd be the first guy I go to.
That's why I mentioned him, because he's the first. Yeah. He's really the only Sacramento guy that I have any interest in. I don't love him, but like you said, if you're loaded on Memphis guys and you're trying to run it back, I think he's the first option here. Because, dude, as good as Cauley-Stein has been, Marc Gasol will make life hell for opposing centers.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's talk Pelicans, and I almost said Saints and Yankees. How about that, man? That's some shit right there. Not only getting the sport wrong, but adding in 2 different sports. New Orleans Pelicans, New York Knicks. 10.5 points given to the Knicks. No surprise. 227.5 total here, Adam. Let's just jump right into it. Talk about Anthony Davis. But before we do, I want you to explain what you talked to me about with Mirotic. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think, we still haven't heard anything about it, so I'm guessing it was nothing, but he did re-injure his ankle at the very, very, very end of their game against whoever they played 2 days ago, Minnesota, I think. And so I am kind of waiting on news. Basically, if we get news that Mirotic is questionable, like if that comes out late, I'm going to treat it like he's not going to play. If we don't get any news, then I'm treating it like he's in, because we do know that they went through shoot-around today. We've already gotten quotes from Elfrid Payton after shoot-around, and there was no mention of Mirotic. So I'm assuming he's in, but it's just kind of weird that we didn't hear anything about it at all. So that's something to at least keep an eye on and be, I guess, prepared for that news to possibly come out at an inopportune time close to lock.
But you said when you watched that, it was pretty nasty. Like, not
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like, Karis LeVert or anything, but he just landed on the side of his foot. He rolled his ankle. He limped to the sideline. He laid down on the ground, like rolling around, holding his leg. Like, and it was I think it was the same ankle that he had already been dealing with. That's why it was really weird that we didn't hear like anything else about it.
Diverick Holmes says, drink every time Adam says, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have to start. Josh, we're going to have to get a counter up here for one. It'll be a fun game. We'll get
I can work on that.
All right, awesome. Mike V says, why do I have to wait to drink? It's Friday. Good point, sir. So Davis, I like Davis anyway. And I think let's just say in the off chance Mirotic is out, Davis just becomes like a lock it up play for me instead of just a really good play. Where are you at with the front court here and the entire New Orleans team?
If we assume Mirotic is in, I actually do like him a decent amount here. I like Davis also. The problem is that I like Giannis a little bit more than I like Davis. We'll get to that game, obviously. But, there's nothing from this team that I dislike. Like, I wouldn't talk you off of it if you like them, but I also am not prioritizing any of them because I just have other guys at their positions that I like. I'm also assuming Alfred Payton's in. If Payton ends up missing this game, then I like Drew Holiday a lot more.
The Boom just said to ship my money on Lavi. Saw that live. He had a very shocked face, and at the time I would have bet heavily he wouldn't play today. Shocked that there's no tag on Nico. So, yeah, you're not alone there, Adam.
Yeah.
So, wait, are you saying you're not prioritizing anyone, including Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Nick's side. Oh, if you are playing like heavy Davis, I think running it back with Hardaway is not the craziest idea on a site like DraftKings. He's $6,700. They've been blown out a lot recently, so his minutes have been down. But you still have a 30% usage rate on this guy. You still have 37, 38 minutes in close games. And if you're loading up on Davis, you're really hoping that this game goes 4 quarters and not 3. So Hardaway is a guy that I would have interest in. And then Kevin Knox has played 24 more minutes in 3 straight games. But again, the blowouts make it difficult to really evaluate where his run is going to be in competitive games. Where are you at on the Knicks?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Basically, my interest for the most part is in if I do end up with like Anthony Davis lineups, then I really want Tim Hardaway in there. I think that Kevin Knox is a fine value play. Like, he's not really getting talked about all that much, I don't think. And he's cheap enough that you can certainly go there. Emmanuel Mudiay comes with a ton of risk, but he is starting at point again. We don't really know how many minutes he's going to play. We don't really know how he's going to play because it's Emmanuel Mudiay, but he's cheap enough that, again, you can roll him out there. But there's just nothing that I'm looking at with much confidence from this team because the rotations are just all over the place. The players aren't really that good. So it's tough to really feel confident in anything.
Yeah, it's really tough to feel confident. That's why Hardaway in tournaments is somebody that stands out to me. If I'm playing Davis, like, it makes more sense if I'm playing someone from New Orleans. Otherwise, I'm not sure I really need to go there. What about this backcourt? Try and make it quick so we can get to this last game and we'll close it out.
For the Knicks?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mudiay, if you want to play him some in tournaments, go for it. He's cheap enough that if he plays well, he should stay on the floor. But there's also a very distinct possibility that he goes out there, turns the ball over like 8 different times, and gets benched for Frank Ntilikina. So there's certainly risk. But he's starting and he's cheap against the kind of questionable Pelicans defense.
Did you mention the backcourt before and then I asked you about it again?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so. When I get into that, we're reading the chat, looking for questions. I get a little bit off track. Next time, just be like, I just talked about that. They don't need to hear it twice.
You also told me to be fast when repeating myself.
Well, next time, be like, yo, I already talked about it. You know how I get. Come on, man. Do me some solids here. I promise I won't take offense. Because even dudes in chat the other week were like, I don't think Laffy listens. I do, but sometimes I'm trying to multitask. All right, Milwaukee and Chicago, Adam. 14.5 points. Biggest spread here. Milwaukee, massive favorites. They're a great basketball team. 225.5 total. That's really no surprise. Go ahead. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll let you run with this on Giannis.
Really, really like Giannis. The only issue, obviously, is the blowout, but that's an issue that everyone's aware of, and so I'm sure it'll keep his ownership a little bit lower than it would otherwise. It's bad Chicago defense. It's a spot where Giannis should be able to get pretty much anything he wants. So I like him a lot. He's significantly cheaper than Anthony Davis on FanDuel. He's like $100 more expensive on DraftKings. So I like him a lot. I like Middleton a lot. I like Brogdon a lot. I like Connaughton. I like Bledsoe. I like everyone from Milwaukee. Where I think it, and I don't think that's surprising. Where I think it really gets interesting though is on DraftKings, the entire Chicago team is underpriced, whether it's for Milwaukee being a good defense or for blowout risk or whatever. You can pretty easily game stack this game, and it gives you just a ton of upside on DraftKings. Where it's going to fail sometimes because Milwaukee does just run away with it, but where it stays competitive, where the production's coming from Chicago, from Levine, from Carter, from Parker. They're all really cheap. It benefits, obviously it correlates positively with the Milwaukee guys. So I love game stacking here on DraftKings.
Yeah, I like it a little less than you do, but if I'm going to play a bunch of Milwaukee, I'm forced to do it because that means I need the game to stay close for it to be of anything of value. You know what I mean? I like Pat Connaughton, man. It doesn't feel good, but with DiVincenzo out, there's a few more minutes to go around there. Connaughton's closed out 2 of their last 3 competitive games, which is interesting. And the one thing I love about the guy is I talk about shot selection a lot. He's taking like 80+% of his shots either from within 3 feet or from 3-point range. So even though he doesn't have high usage, at least he's taking either high percentage shots or shots that are giving you maximum fantasy production. I will have some Connaughton. If it doesn't work out, well, that's because he's Pat Connaughton, but I'm going to do it anyway.
I think that there's plenty of risk as far as his minutes go. I mean, there are plenty of ways this rotation can go where he only plays, 23 or 24 minutes. But I think that the price and upside and matchup and all of that is there to where I still want to, take a chance on him.
All right, real quick. Do you have any interest very quickly in Etuan Moore? I saw someone mention him in chat. Okay.
I mean, he's priced up for what he's been doing lately, and we see this every season. Like he goes through stretches where he does this, but it's not something that you can expect him to continue doing.
Sounds good. Stick around. Live Before Lock, boys, coming up after this. If you are a premium member, we don't have time. I will put our top positions in the Slack chat. And if you're not a premium member but want to become one and don't feel like paying until you see behind the curtain, use the promo code Deeper Dive, all one word, when you sign up on awesemo.com. Hit us with the thumbs up. Show us some love before you head out. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Great luck today, guys. We'll catch you back here. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you on Monday on the Deeper Dive.